onto your butt.
Da-da-da. Oh, hello. Welcome to episode 155 of the Civil War Breakfast Club podcast. As usual, I am joined by Mary, a woman who can now add bitter malort face to her long list of negative facial expressions. I am just a surrendered Harpers Ferry coward named Darren. How's your mood, Mary? How's your mood?
I did not look bitter at all when I tried it.
No, not at all, as far as you know. Good Lord. Anyway, that's a story for another day. So how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing great. It's getting midweek. It's getting late in the week. It got a little rain today, so it's okay. It's good. The weather's cooling off. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. But we got some business to do tonight, Mary. We're going to get right into it. So I will ask you that question we always ask. What are you drinking on this evening?
I am drinking just plain old Yingling tonight.
Just plain old Yingling.
Yep.
My goodness gracious.
I went very basic for tonight.
Okay. And what are you drinking it out of?
I am drinking it out of one of my Gettysburg mugs because, again, decided to go kind of basic.
Okay. Well, you are basic. I've heard that before, but in any case.
And, thank you. What are you drinking?
I thought you were going to forget for a second. I am drinking Little Mac IPA from Antietam Brewery down in Hagerstown, Maryland. And we'll talk about the reason why, but I am drinking it out of my Abraham Lincoln mug because, well, he's sort of part of this, I guess. We don't have any mugs specifically about this. But, Mary, I don't know if you know this, but we are going to, as we record this today is the 163rd anniversary of the Battle of Antietam. And
it is.
Despite its importance, I happen to feel Antietam is the most important battle and the turning point of the Civil War. It doesn't happen if not for the events leading up to it. And when looking at Robert E. Lee's Maryland campaign as a whole, it's easy to focus on a battle that resulted in the single bloodiest day in American history, resulting in 23,110 total casualties. But if not for the battle leading up to it, it never happens. And that battle is the Battle of Harpers Ferry that finished just 2 days earlier on September 15th of 1862.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Harpers Ferry I think it's an often overlooked battle in the Maryland campaign. Admittedly, I didn't know much about it until, we researched this episode. And it's very interesting. And definitely, as you said, it's one of those things that, it is going to lead to Antietam and probably, also factor into the outcome of Antietam as well. But Harpers Ferry, which today it is part of West Virginia, but during the Maryland campaign, it was part of the state of Virginia. Before the Civil War, Harpers Ferry is home to 3,000 people. It sits at the confluence of the Potomac and the Shenandoah rivers. It is a great place for industry, and as such, the town is home to the United States Armory, which has over 20 factory buildings and 400 employees. The Baltimore and Ohio Railway and Chesapeake and Ohio Canal also provide a steady flow of people into the town, and they contribute to businesses as well. Mm-hmm. So before the Civil War, as many of our listeners probably know, the town had gained notoriety for being the site of where John Brown was captured. John Brown and his supporters would descend upon the town on October 17th, 1859. They capture prominent citizens and seize the federal armory and arsenal. Brown ends up taking refuge in the Arsenal engine house, and on October 18th, U.S. Marines, led by then Colonel Robert E. Lee, arrive and they storm the engine house. Many of the raiders are killed and Brown is captured. Another notable Confederate is there as well, Jeb Stuart. Brown was quickly put on trial and charged with treason against the state of Virginia, murder, and slave insurrection. He is sentenced to death and hanged on December 2nd, 1859. And so getting back to the industries and everything else that makes up Harpers Ferry, at the onset of the Civil War, this is why Harpers Ferry is immediately seen as being a town of strategic importance by both North and South. Now, during the war, the town is going to change hands 8 times, but will be under Union control for 80% of the war. And it was on April 17th, 1861, that Virginia is going to secede from the Union. The day after this, the Virginia militia will march on Harpers Ferry. Federal soldiers end up setting fire to the U.S. Armory and Arsenal, which destroys 15,000 weapons. And not long after this, on April 28th, 1861, Colonel Thomas Jackson, yes, that guy that later is going to be known as Stonewall, will take his first command of the war at Harpers Ferry. And it is over the next 7 weeks that all machinery and tools from the armory are removed and shipped south to Richmond, Virginia, and Fayetteville, North Carolina, where they will be used to produce weapons for the Confederacy.
And I think it's also important before we get to the battle, we have to get to how the armies got there, right? And why Harper's Ferry was so important. And again, by the end of August of 62, Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, I mean, they were on a heater. They were on a roll, right? On August 30th, they just finished completing a pantsing of John Pope's Army of Virginia at the Battle of Second Manassas in Virginia. And Pope and his battered troops were limping back to Washington while Lee and his top subordinates, so the aforementioned Stonewall Jackson and James Longstreet, they're going to celebrate a strategically brilliant, battle plan. President Abraham Lincoln, Mary, the guy with the hat we talk about, he will dump John Pope and send him to Minnesota to fight the Sioux in the 1862 Dakota War. And despite a collective, "Are you kidding me?" in Washington, Lincoln is going to put George McClellan back in charge of a merged Army of Virginia / Army of the Potomac, on September 2nd of 62. This move was so hated that most of Lincoln's cabinet signed a petition saying, quote, "Our deliberate opinion that, at this time, it is not safe to entrust to Major General McClellan the command of the Army of the United States." So in charge again, McClellan knows his task is to defend Washington, but also to rebuild and re-energize his smashed army.
Yeah.
He also had to do this while dealing with the constant meddling from Lincoln, Edward Stanton, and Henry Halleck, as well as what would prove to be awful intelligence information coming to him from intelligence agent Allen Miss Cleo Pinkerton, as well as a Pennsylvania governor, Andrew Curtin.
That needs to be a meme. And I was just going to say with when I'm researching this, it really hit me, and I don't know why it didn't dawn on me before. But here you have the second battle of Manassas, which the Union Army gets pantsed again, and that happens in late August 1862. It is 17 days later. Well, actually, even less than that. If you obviously we're going to count the Battle of South Mountain in here.
It wasn't a leap year, right?
No, no, but just. September 14th, they're fighting at the Battle of South Mountain. McClellan has managed to somehow reorganize how broken they were.
And he does a good job.
Yeah.
But the only thing McClellan knew for sure was Lee was massing his army to the town of Leesburg, Virginia, and some of his troops were spilling into Maryland. But like you were saying, what was he planning to attack? Washington? Baltimore? Was he going to loot the Food King? I mean, McClellan had no idea. So, what does he do? He'll march his army cautiously to keep Washington and Baltimore protected while rebuilding his army, but also ready to march that army north in case Lee did move in that direction. Now, remember, McClellan was very popular with his men, who usually cheered his presence, the same way you do when I bring home beer, the way you cheer me, right? But Lee, he does move his men north, and during September 4th to the 7th, he will cross the Potomac near Leesburg and then proceed to Frederick, Maryland. Now, on September 9th, Lee was encamped near Frederick, not far from the current Battle of Monocacy, the visitor center there, where he had a meeting with Jackson and Longstreet, to plan that attack further into Maryland and hopefully into PA. But there's a problem, Mary. There's always a problem, right? In the towns of Martinsburg, Virginia, and Harpers Ferry, then Virginia, now West Virginia, there were 2 federal garrisons of troops and supplies that would cause a cramp in Lee's junk if he moved north, right?
Yep.
The reason was those garrisons they would threaten the supply lines and communication lines back to Virginia. So basically, they'd be between Lee's army and his supply lines.
Yep.
Martinsburg, commanded by General Julius White, he had about 2,500 guys, while Harper's Ferry was commanded by Colonel Dixon Miles, and he posed a greater threat. I mean, he had about 10,000 guys.
Yeah.
Martinsburg also was an extremely pro-Union for a Virginia town. As a matter of fact, it was so anti-secession that Lee's generals called the town Little Massachusetts.
Wow.
And, Lee knew that any success he had going deeper into Maryland and then PA depended on his army seizing and controlling those 2 key federal garrisons.
Yeah. And Harper's Ferry, just wanted to add, has been occupied by Union troops since February 25th, 1862. And this is when Colonel Dixon Miles has been given command of the brigade there. And they are occupying it again because of the strategy of it, right? They need to maintain communication and supply lines on the railway. And also they are trying to deter invasion from the Shenandoah Valley. And it's, over 10,000 men that are stationed there. And Colonel Miles has been in charge of them since March 29th, 1862.
Yeah. So what is Lee going to do? Here's what his plan basically was. He'll take Stonewall Jackson, and Jackson will take 2/3 of the army, 3 wings, to seize Harper's Ferry and Martinsburg no later than Friday, September 12th. Because he wants the weekend. Obviously that he wants that done by then. 2 of Jackson's divisions under Lafayette McLaws and John G. Walker, they would seize Maryland Heights and Loudon Heights, 2 mountains surrounding Harper's Ferry, and it would force its surrender. James Longstreet's wing would proceed to Boonesboro, Maryland, while D.H. Hill's division, Daniel Harvey Hill, would act as the rear guard on their march from Frederick. Now, once Harper's Ferry and Martinsburg were in control, Jackson would return to the combined army in Boonesboro, or Hagerstown maybe, by September 16th. This was called Lee's Order Number 191. Now, despite what you may have read on Facebook, Mary, okay, this was not Lee's Antietam battle plan.
Please refer to our episode that we did a couple years ago on Lost Order 191.
You remembered. Outstanding. This was merely an order directing where his armies were to go, okay? It was a bold plan, admittedly, because Lee was significantly splitting his army, but on December 10th, the day he issued the order...
You mean September 10th?
What did I say?
December.
September 10th. Jumping way ahead. On September 10th, the day he issued the order, Jackson's men began to march through Turner's Gap on South Mountain to Boonesboro, Maryland, where they camped the night of the 10th. That would be September.
Yeah.
The next day, Jackson crossed the Potomac at Williamsport as his wing prepared to move on that garrison at Martinsburg. Now, around this time, Union scouts, they saw Jackson's army a-coming and informed General White, the commander again of that Martinsburg garrison, who quickly realized his 2,500 men weren't going to be a matchup for Jackson. So what does he do? He goes...
GTFO's it?
He's going to GTFO it. He will withdraw his men from the garrison and move 20 miles south to Harper's Ferry, where he will join Colonel Dixon Miles, where together, with around 12,500 men, he felt he had better odds to defeat this oncoming Confederate onslaught. Mm-hmm. So in the end, Jackson's going to seize the Federal garrison of Martinsburg without a shot.
Yeah.
So when Jackson realized that he had taken Martinsburg or in Little Massachusetts that easily, he said, quote, "This is the height of happiness, and these are the most delightful moments of my life." That was the quote he had.
That's what he said.
For capturing Martinsburg, so the bar on it was there it was, right?
Oh my God.
But the Confederates immediately grabbed all the supplies that White had left behind, and they set up their new camp right there in Martinsburg.
Mm-hmm. I did a little bit of background research on Julius White, too. So he is from New York. He later lives in Chicago, and he eventually moves to pursue commercial business in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And he's going to serve on the 2nd Wisconsin legislature, but just for one term. He returns to Chicago after that, and he's going to be a member of the Chicago Board of Trade, and he's also a member of the Whig Party. During the presidential election of 1860, White invited Abraham Lincoln to visit him at his new house in Evanston, and Lincoln is actually going to stay there. And on March 30th, 1861, President Lincoln will appoint White as customs collector for the Port of Chicago. He will resign his post on September 19th, 1861, and receive a commission as colonel of the 37th Illinois Volunteer Infantry Regiment. Now, he's going to be in the Western Theater first, and he's going to be at the Battle of Pea Ridge on March 7th, 1862. He gets promoted to brigadier general on June 9th, 1862, and he will be in charge of the Railroad Brigade. White is going to find himself retreating into Harper's Ferry, as you already said, during the Maryland campaign, where he's going to join Colonel Dixon S. Miles. Now, you'll notice White is a general, Miles is a colonel. So, but when General White gets there to where Colonel Miles is at Harper's Ferry, Colonel Miles is actually the one that's in charge and is going to be kind of leading things. White kind of defers to him since he's been there and he's been in charge of the garrison for a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So while this is all going on, Jackson is still moving his parts around the chessboard. Jackson's moving on towards Martinsburg while he's doing that, but McLaws and Walker's troops were also proceeding towards Harper's Ferry. Now, on September 11th, John G. Walker's 3,400 Rebs They'll cross the Potomac at a place called Nolan's Ferry near a town of Point Rocks, Maryland, which is just 20 miles southeast of Harpers Ferry. Now, from there, he'll move to Hillsborough, Virginia. He'll encamp, and on 9/13, he'll arrive at the eastern slope of Loudon Heights, a 900-foot rise just southeast of Harpers Ferry. Home of Potomac Ridge Brewery, by the way.
Yes. Right? Great brewery, great
No,
bar pizza.
Harpers Ferry Brewery.
Harpers Ferry,
Harpers
yes.
Ferry Brewery.
Potomac Ridge is outside of in Sharpsburg.
That's right.
Get your breweries straight.
But by 2 p.m., Walker has 2 regiments, the 27th North Carolina and the 30th Virginia, on Loudon Heights. Now, the 30th Virginia, Mary, you may remember, it is commanded by John R. Cook, the brother-in-law of Jeb Stuart and the son of Union General Philip St. George Cook. So there you go. Colonel Dixon Miles at Harpers Ferry was completely oblivious to Walker's presence on Loudon Heights. Had no idea.
Wasn't it that he didn't think that they would occupy it, that he thought they were going to come in by Bolivar Heights, and that's why he has his men concentrated up there instead? He doesn't have enough men. Basically,
couldn't spare a square. I mean, he couldn't put any men up in Loudon Heights because we'll get to that, but you're absolutely right. Lafayette McLaw's 8,000 men, they were moving on Maryland Heights, the 1,448-foot mountain just north of Harpers Ferry, and without a doubt, the key point on the field.
It definitely is. And it was Lafayette McLaw's that said, so long as Maryland Heights is occupied by the enemy, Harpers Ferry could never be occupied by us. If we gained possession of the heights, the town was no longer tenable to us. So Maryland Heights was designed to fight off raiders, but not hold off the heights themselves. But it is probably one of the most important parts of, when it comes to occupying Harpers Ferry.
Oh, it's the point.
Yeah.
It's the Cemetery Hill. It's the Mule Shoe. It's that's what it is.
Cheatham Hill. Let's give some love to the Western Theater.
Right. I'm just saying that is the key point. Jackson knew the only way they could take Harpers Ferry, Jackson knew this too, would be if Maryland Heights was under his control. If they got it, it was just a matter of time until the Union had to surrender the garrison. Now, unlike John Walker's job, McLaw's task was significantly tougher, because McLaws knew he had to have enough men to control Maryland Heights, but also he had to block the potential Union escape routes into Maryland afterwards, while also guarding his Savannah, his rear, from McClellan's men in case they pursued him. Remember, his division was effectively and completely cut off from the rest of Jackson's army. They're on the northern side of the Potomac. They had no chance of getting reinforcements, and most of McClellan's army was on his side of the river. So if McClellan's army did arrive, he was completely on his own. So the clock was ticking. They had to seize Harpers Ferry and get away before Union reinforcements got there to relieve Miles' garrison. So McLaws has 10 total brigades, but ordered just 2 to the crest of Elk Ridge, which was the northern point of Maryland Heights. Now, by September 11th, I'm going to move some dates around a little bit, but that's okay, McLaws was moving through South Mountain towards Harpers Ferry, and he's about 5 or 6 miles away. Now remember, Lee wanted Harpers Ferry under control by the 12th, so they're already behind schedule. So by nightfall the next night on the 12th, McLaws was finally near Harpers Ferry, and he sent those 2 brigades, one under Joseph Kershaw and William Barksdale, to follow Solomon's Gap to the crest of Elk Ridge on Maryland Heights. Now again, unlike Loudon Heights, McLaws is going to discover that Maryland Heights was defended. Colonel Dixon Miles knew the Rebs were coming. The previous spring during Jackson's Valley campaign, the Rebs tried to seize Harpers Ferry from the west, but again, they fell back. But Miles remembered, Pepperidge Farm remembers, right? That if they tried again, they'd probably try the same game plan by attacking Bolivar Heights to the west of the town. So he ignored Loudon Heights completely, but Miles did see the obvious importance again of defending Maryland Heights, so he began to formulate a defense of the garrison. So let me give you some quick background on Dixon Miles real quick, okay? Dixon Stanberry Miles was born on May 4th of 1804 near Baltimore, Maryland, to Captain Aquila Miles and Elizabeth Stanberry. Now, he enrolled at West Point on June 24th of 1819. It was part of the class of 1824, where he finished 27th in the class, okay? Miles was just one of 2 Civil War participants in the class, including Colonel Electus Bactus, who sounds like a character from Monty Python's Life of Brian, but I digress. But he was also in the same class as the famed engineer and fort builder Dennis Mahan, who became West Point's professor of engineering from 1830 to 1871. He helped build Fort Fisher. I mean, he was the fort guy. After graduation, Miles would become a second lieutenant in the 4th United States Infantry, serving at Cantonment, Clinch, Florida, where he rose in the ranks. Now, he'll become an assistant quartermaster in Texas in the Mexican War in 1847. He'll participate in the battles of Monterey and Veracruz, where Monterey he'll be breveted for gallant and meritorious conduct. But after the war, Miles stayed in the Southwest, basically being stationed mostly in New Mexico. But when the Civil War broke out, Miles went to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, as a colonel of the 2nd Infantry. But soon he went to Northern Virginia, and he was put in charge of a brigade under Major General Robert Patterson. Now, eventually he'll become a division commander and lead 2 brigades under Irvin McDowell. But at First Manassas, Miles was basically in reserve, and here is where he began to earn a really bad reputation.
Yeah, he doesn't have the greatest reputation.
No. According to General Israel Richardson, Miles was hammered drunk during the day of the Battle of First Manassas, and an official court of inquiry found him guilty, but still cleared him of all charges. But that his reputation of as a call me maybe Hasselhoff and the cheeseburger level drunk, that was forged. And from that point on, he was considered a drunk and an incompetent. So that was something for his LinkedIn page, right? So he gets cleared of the charges, but he was out of command until March of 1862, when he assumes command first of the Railroad Brigade, protecting the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. But then, to your point, he is named commander of the garrison at Harpers Ferry. Yeah. But anyways, on the evening of Thursday, September 11th, Miles begins to position his troops around Harpers Ferry for its defense. He had 4 brigades and around 11,000 or so men. Almost 7,000 were placed on Bolivar Heights. His 1st Brigade, under Colonel Frederick Dutassi, was placed on the northern side of Bolivar Heights on the Union far right. To Dutassi's left was Colonel William Trimble. Colonel William Ward's brigade, made up of infantry and heavy artillery, was placed on the northern part of the town of Harpers Ferry in a place called Camp Hill. Not far from where the large parking lot is today, by the way, if you go to the town. Yeah. Well, there's never any parking, by the way, but I digress.
In Harpers Ferry?
In Harpers Ferry.
You have to get there at like 7 a.m. to get parking.
Yeah, exactly. But last was Colonel Thomas Ford, who had the hardest task. His small brigade was placed on Maryland Heights. Now, Ford, he commanded the 32nd Ohio, but on Maryland Heights, he commanded 4 brigades, 1,600 men, including the 126th New York, which had been on the field for less than 3 weeks and had 0 combat experience.
Well, that's the one thing Miles has to do is he's got these green troops in there, and he's trying, as he's organizing everything, to mix up those battle seasoned guys, or the ones that have been there for longer, with these green guys, so that it's not all just green guys in one place.
I heard someone once say that's not easy being green, right?
Your friend Kermit?
Hello. But Ford also had 2 9-inch Dahlgren guns, a Parrott rifle, and 4 Napoleons. So even though the town was basically in a bowl surrounded by 3 nearby mountains, Miles felt that his 4 brigades could hold the garrison based on the fact that he did it earlier in the spring when Jackson attacked during the Valley Campaign. So he's got a little false bravado going on here. The Battle of Harpers Ferry will begin during the evening of September 12th, when Kershaw's brigade will approach Maryland Heights from the east. Now, up on the hill was a brigade of, like I said, Colonel Thomas Ford, who could see the Rebs slowly climb up the slope and quickly had a personal pucker effect moment. Ford immediately messaged Miles begging for reinforcements, who agreed to send him 3 additional regiments plus 2 guns to Ford on Maryland Heights as soon as he could. So, though short on experienced soldiers, the Federals did have breastworks and abattis, which slowed Kershaw's men down for the most part. But when darkness fell, the rebels called it a night and fell back, and they knew they would be ready to renew that assault first light on the 13th. So, and like you said a while ago, Though Harper's Ferry was a military garrison, it was a town.
Yep.
You mentioned there was 3,000 in 1862. By the time of this battle, it was down to 100 people. That's all. Many in the town were freedmen and women or contrabands, escaped slaves seeking refuge in Harper's Ferry as they moved north to freedom.
And a lot of the buildings have been turned into hospitals. Yeah. And one Ohio soldier said that the town's not even worth $10.
Yeah. I mean, the civilians are going to spend the next few days hiding in basements. We'll get to the civilians again towards the end as the rebels all came in on Harper's Ferry. So the morning of September 13th, Ford woke up not feeling well. He had a little man flu, right? And he decided,
like what you've had for the last week?
No, I guess so. But he woke up not feeling too well, and he decided he was too sick to lead. So he turned command over to Colonel Eliakim Sherrill, commander of the 126th New York and later of Gettysburg fame.
Later screwed by General Hancock.
There we go, right? Ford fell back 2 miles behind the lines and out of harm's way, and he was pretty much out of it. So at 7 o'clock in the morning on September 13th, Joseph Kershaw's South Carolinians, they're going to move in a double line forward up that mountain towards Ford's line, now Sherrill's line. And while Kershaw moved up, William Barksdale's Mississippi men, who apparently were ready on this day, they moved to the south and around the Union right flank through the woods, planning to get into the rear and flank of the Union troops. Okay? So that's kind of how it's slowly setting up. Mm-hmm. Sherrill's line was spread over a 300-yard line. Left to right, it was the 1st Maryland, the 32nd Ohio, the 126th New York, and the 9th Vermont was in the rear. As soon as Kershaw saw the Union line, they charged, and seeing this, the 1st Maryland on the Union left, what do? They ran like hell down the mountain towards Harper's Ferry in full panic mode as if they were being chased by clowns, right? Kershaw's men fixed bayonets once they got within 100 yards of the Federal line. Now with just 3 regiments, and the Rebs will hit that Union line straight on. Now, the mountainous terrain, like I mentioned, Barksdale's trying to get around the side. They're going to get slowed, and he could not get on the Union right until after 10. Now, don't forget, this thing started at 7 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. It's now 10 o'clock. And Barksdale, when he gets there, Colonel John Pfizer of the 17th Mississippi will order his regiment, this is out of Barksdale, to open fire, and they started pounding away at the right flank of the 126th New York, as well as those Vermonters in the 9th Vermont who were just behind them. At this point, guess what happens with Eliakim Sherrill? He gets shot in the face.
Oh, gosh.
The ball is going to go through his cheek and tore away part of his tongue. But he'll live. But now the battles he'll be taken.
How's he able to talk?
I don't know. Well, he left. He was out of there too. He was taken to the rear. So now Union command will fall to a Major Sylvester Hewitt of the 32nd Ohio, who will try to stop these green troops of the 126th New York from running. But again, it's useless because now Sherrill's gone. The best he could do is spike the guns and get the hell out of there himself. And that's what happens. The Feds were retreating down the mountain like kids running from a DQ in the summertime. They wanted to go. So by 11 o'clock in the morning now, the Federal breastworks of Maryland Heights were abandoned, and now the Confederates have it. And it was around this time that back near Frederick, 2 men from the 27th Indiana, Corporal Barton Mitchell and Sergeant Joseph Blas, were sitting around in a camp vacated earlier in that day by General D.H. Hill's division. They're going to notice a piece of paper wrapped around 3 cigars, which was another copy of Lee's Order 191 explaining where his troops were going. So again, we're not getting into the details of that whole thing.
No.
But to suffice it to say, McClellan got a break here, and he began to move his army towards Harper's Ferry to help defend the garrison that he now knew was under imminent attack.
Contrary to popular belief, and we discussed this in our episode about South Mountain and 191, McClellan does not sit on his rear for 16 hours.
No, he doesn't.
Sorry.
No, but back at Harper's Ferry, it was around this time in the early afternoon of the 13th now that Colonel Miles is going to cross the Potomac to see what was happening, and what he saw was his troops running down the heights towards the town. Seeing his men running, Miles yells, quote, "God Almighty, they are coming down! Hell and damnation!" That's what he yells. Now, Kershaw and Barksdale are going to spend that early afternoon on the 13th occupying those Union breastworks on Maryland Heights, while the rest of McLaws' division was back at a nearby village called Sandy Hook, ready to cut off any Union retreat as well as watch their rear for McClellan's guys. Now, Miles has no choice, but he's got to redeploy Ford's men onto Bolivar Heights with the rest of the 7,000 troops to try to hold that line now against an attack he knew he was coming. But like we were saying, Mary, Maryland Heights is now gone, so by the nightfall on the 13th, Miles knew he was FUBAR. He was SOL and JWF.
Oh, he thinks that, Bolivar Heights is going to protect the town.
He was. And Miles is pissed. He's fuming and he's yelling at his subordinates, quote, "I am ordered to hold this place and goddamn my soul to hell if I don't." So that's what he said. Yep. So while McLaws was strengthening his position on Maryland Heights, the rest of Jackson's wing was moving to get into their positions around Harper's Ferry. Now, Jackson had an ace in the hole, and you mentioned it at the beginning. In 1861, Jackson commanded Harper's Ferry, so he knew how to defend it, and more important, he knew its weaknesses. He had the answers to the test, and Colonel Miles, at this point, he had no chance whatsoever, none.
I believe Harper's Ferry is actually the place where Jackson got his horse, Little Sorrel.
I might be right.
He captured it from some Union trains.
Yeah, absolutely.
Little random fact there.
There you go. Write that down. But Jackson had marched his wing 13 miles from Martinsburg to just northwest of Harper's Ferry now during the morning of the 13th.
I got to give those guys credit for marching like that, because apparently, Lee's army is, it's kind of demoralized. But the other thing, too, is that a lot of these guys don't have shoes. And they don't have a lot of, rations and stuff. So you think about it, you're hungry, you don't have shoes, you're going into autumn, weather's starting to get a little bit colder, but there you are, you're marching with Jackson.
You are, and you're going to move quick. But
yep.
But what's going on in Loudon Heights at this point? John G. Walker's division had control of those heights by early afternoon on the 13th. And like I said, Miles had no idea Walker's men were there. So he said no one to defend it. Now, Colonel Miles will at this point sends another urgent message to McClellan, who was in Frederick, Maryland at this time. And he told him, look, I'll be lucky if I can hold this place for 48 hours. I need help ASAP. And McClellan's going to message back, basically saying, hey, listen, can you hold out as long as you can? Help is on the way. But really all he was doing was offering thoughts and prayers at that point, because he couldn't get people through South Mountain just yet. Saturday morning on September 14th, we'll see Jackson's men streaming towards Bolivar Heights, while Walker built roads now during the previous night on Loudon Heights so he can bring his guns up as artillery. So by 8 o'clock in the morning now, Walker has 5 rifled guns on Loudon Heights, all facing the town, and he was told by Jackson not to fire until McLaws' guns are up and ready on Maryland Heights. So likewise, McLaws will spend the morning of the 14th building a road to get artillery up that slope of Maryland Heights. Imagine how hard that must have been.
I mean, anybody who's been there, you know how it looks.
They had to carry them with ropes to pull these things up.
Yep.
And they got to position troops behind him at Pleasant Valley to protect his men against Union troops that could be coming through South Mountain. So to do that, McLaws will place the former governor of Georgia and former Secretary of the United States Treasury, turned Confederate General Howell Cobb, now a general, and his men nearby at a gap in South Mountain called Crampton's Gap. McLaws knows if Union troops come through that gap, his position will be threatened, and he'll be completely cut off from the rest of Jackson's army, and he'll basically be screwed. General Paul Semmes will be sent to defend Solomon's Gap as well, and he'll also send some troops to assist Cobb at Crampton's as well. Richard H. Anderson will be deployed at Weaverton, Maryland. So all 3 of these generals' jobs were to watch McLaws' backside against McClellan while he helped seize Harper's Ferry as fast as he possibly could.
This is the danger of dividing as well. This is the risk that Lee takes, and I can't imagine how he would have felt out when he's like, McLaws could be cut off from us.
He was. But McLaws' instincts were right, though, because approaching Crampton's Gap were troops from the Union 6th Corps under William Franklin. Now, Franklin's men hit Crampton's Gap, which would be the third gap of the Union would strike that day, which would be known as the Battle of South Mountain. And I imagine that the troops would have heard the guns coming from Fox's Gap and Turner's Gap. But Cobb,
likely. Everything echoes around those mountains.
But Cobb held and slowed Franklin's approach initially. But for McLaws, the sand was running out of the hourglass, and he knew it. Walker was supposed to wait for McLaws to fire, but at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, he said screw it and opened up his guns on Harper's Ferry. He fired early. McLaws did get his guns up in Maryland Heights, but not until about 2 p.m., and by then he'll join in that cannonade. And all this while the Battle of Crampton's Gap is going full banana at this point.
Yeah.
Franklin's men are pushing hard through the gap to get to Harper's Ferry, before it fell. And I'm sure they could hear McLaws and Walker's guns at this point as well. Cobb will hold out as long as he could before he has to fall back, thanks to the efforts of troops like the 1st New Jersey, who drove the Rebs through that gap and sent the Confederates, again, back towards Pleasant Valley. But it should be noted, though, that Cobb did exactly what he was supposed to do by buying that valuable time for Jackson to take Harper's Ferry before Franklin's men could arrive. And so, in response to the cannonade by Walker and McLaws, Miles, he's going to order his cannon on Bolivar Heights to turn and begin returning fire. But there's a problem, Mary. Guess what the problem is? The guns can't reach.
No.
They're too far and the mountains are too high. So the Miles' guns are completely and utterly useless. Mm-hmm. The men who bore the brunt of this rebel artillery, the people, weren't just Miles' men, but it was those 100 civilians huddled in basements, hiding from the incoming shells. A local woman named Jessie Johnson told of the shelling, and this is her quote, "Several houses on Bolivar had been struck and were burning. Women and children were running in danger of being struck, some fainting, all crying. Our basement was filled with women and children. We had to keep it dark for fear that light would draw fire from the mountain on the Maryland side." So Miles, realizing his guns did no good, he ordered the firing to stop. And then when night fell, the rebels stopped as well. They kind of pulled a stop on it. So during the night of the 14th, Miles will set up a council of war with his staff to discuss his idea of evacuating Harper's Ferry. Now, General Julius White, who had commanded that Martinsburg garrison, was very, very, very much disagreed with Miles, and he demanded they fight to recapture Maryland Heights the next morning. Yep. He's like, why don't we just take the friggin' Heights back?
Well, it's because it's such a, Harper's Ferry, as we said at the beginning of this episode, is a very important place strategically. It is going to change it's going to change hands 8 times during the Civil War, and it's because of its strategic importance. And if you haven't been there, I would encourage our listeners to visit, Harper's Ferry, but also the surrounding area. And yes, go to Harper's Ferry Brewing.
Oh, yeah.
You will see what we mean.
So you have White who's saying, let's take Maryland Heights. And Miles tells him, nah, it's pointless, which pissed off just about everybody. Because remember, not only did he have the reputation of being a drunk, he also had the rep of being completely incompetent and over his skis with this. Yeah. Now, this was how the stage was set heading in now to September 15th. Some of Miles' men had just about had it with him after this council of war in this entire battle. Colonel Benjamin Franklin Grimes Davis, his brigade, was to be placed in the town and be subject to the shelling from both mountains. And he's like, you know what? We're going to be sitting ducks if we sit here. Now, this was the 8th New York with a company from the 12th Illinois, as well as 200 cavalry from Rhode Island and Maryland. So late on the 14th, Davis and his 1,400 men decide to blow the popsicle stand. He orders Special Order GTFO, and the whole brigade, without orders, vacates the dance floor with extreme motivation and snuck out of Harper's Ferry right under Jackson's nose on a small road parallel to the Shenandoah River. Along the way, they'll capture 40 wagons from James Longstreet near Hagerstown, by the way. They'll make it all the way to Sharpsburg, Maryland. They're going to get there around midnight until they go into Pennsylvania. So they just the hell with this. They just take off. Yep. Why not? The next morning, September 15th, it was a Monday, Jackson's artillery chief, Colonel Stapleton Crutchfield, Hill placed batteries on Lower Bolivar Heights and Schoolhouse Ridge, which meant that there were now about 70 total guns staring down at Harpers Ferry. Can you imagine 70 guns? So at 6 o'clock in the morning, the rebel artillery will open up again from all three heights at the same time. Miles now is going to order his artillery to respond on the guns at Bolivar because he can reach them. But inexplicably, guess what happens? The feds run out of ammo.
Yep.
Somehow Dixon Miles had not secured enough artillery to hold out for more than a few hours. And by 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, they were out. I mean, just imagine.
Can you imagine the frustration that the troops had, that it's like, they're probably realizing we are going to lose Harpers Ferry.
Well, that's why Grimes took off.
Yeah.
He's like, this is ridiculous. Jackson knew now it was time to send in his infantry. And the man he put as part of his infantry assault was none other than who?
A.P. Hill.
A.P. Hill. Now, what's funny, Hill's story throughout the Maryland campaign is a fascinating one in itself. And I guess we'll talk about it really quickly. Though heading into Harpers Ferry, he was actually under arrest.
Yeah, because he and Jackson had been fighting. And I can't, and who knows about what? Apparently, so this goes back to West Point. A.P. Hill, in his class at West Point, he's friends with a lot of different people. And one of them is not Stonewall Jackson at all. They apparently do not get along at all. And it goes into the Civil War as well for whatever reason. And they're just not getting along. And so A.P. Hill, when he's at West Point, he's there with Darius Couch, George Pickett, Jesse Reno, George Stoneman, Truman Seymour, Cadmus Wilcox.
The great Cadmus Wilcox.
Yes, great Cadmus Wilcox, and most notably George McClellan. He and George McClellan are going to have a little bit of a falling out as well, which we've talked a few times about on this podcast, because George and Ambrose like the same lady. And the lady's mom, she likes George a little bit more than she likes Ambrose. So she spread some rumors around New York City that Ambrose was visiting some, what is it called? Ladies of ill repute.
Looking for love in all the wrong places.
Yes, he was. But as I said, Thomas Jackson's also in his class and they don't get along.
But the official reason why he was arrested was per the report that he was 30 minutes late in getting his troops to where they were supposed to be. That's why he got arrested.
I mean, Jackson arrests everybody. I don't care who you are. You're not special not to say that you're not special, but... Well,
he hands out arrests like Oprah hands out cars, if you really think about it, right?
I think he just expects a lot of his men. And if you're if you're 30 minutes late, or if you disobey an order at Kernstown, Garnett, you're going to get your ass handed to you by Jackson.
But it's, again, so when the assault was being planned on the Confederate side on the 14th, Hill wants to be a part of it. He reaches out to Jackson's aide, Henry Kidd Douglas, the most handsome man in the Confederacy, and asked him to ask Jackson if he could get out of the doghouse for a while and lead the assault, at least temporarily. Then he'll go back to be arrested afterwards. So Stonewall obviously acquiesced to this request and returned him to command of his division temporarily until the battle was over. So Hill is going to place his commands in battle formation. Dorsey Penner's North Carolinians Brigade will be on the left, with James Archer's Alabamians, Georgias, and Tennessees next to him. Charles Field's Virginians were next to Archer, followed by Lawrence Branch's North Carolina Brigade. And on Hill's far right was the fun lover Maxcy Gregg and his South Carolinians. Now, Pender's brigade are going to move first, and as Hill's men approach the Union lines on Bolivar Heights, they begin to see something they didn't expect. They see a bunch of little white handkerchiefs sprouting out up and down the Federal line. Colonel Miles was telling his men to surrender and ordered Captain Philo Phillips of Company D on the 126th New York to wave his white flag. This is a great story with Phillips, by the way. Okay, Phillips did not want to surrender. Phillips refused, and he said, quote, "For God's sakes, Colonel, do not surrender us." Miles yells back, quote, "They will blow us out of this place in half," and ordered Phillips to surrender. Phillips again refused. Miles responded, quote, "Do you know who you are talking to?" And Phillips responds, quote, "I suppose I am talking to Colonel Miles, but I know I'm speaking to a damn traitor." Miles begins to ride off in disgust on his horse. While this little argument's going on, Hill would have ordered his artillery battery, that Purcell Artillery under William Pegram, along with William Crenshaw's battery, to open up on the Union lines, which was leading to more confusion and panic. It was during this bombardment, in this argument, right when Dixon rode away, that he will be wounded when a shell exploded under his horse and blood started to squirt from his legs. Miles yelled, quote, "My God, I'm hit." Captain Phillips, from before, he was nearby when Miles was hit and was heard to say, quote, "Good."
Well, there is one story, or there's one theory that Miles was hit by his own men.
Well, I mean, it's possible. I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I was kind of like, no.
But Phillips saying "good" when the colonel went down is brutal. I mean, that just is. One of Miles' aides, Lieutenant Henry Binney, was with him, and Miles turned to him and said, "Well, Mr. Binney," there's a quote, "we have done our duty, but where can McClellan be?" Binney asked for help for Miles, and Captain Benjamin F. Lee of the 126th New York came forward and put him in an ambulance. But it was clear Miles' injury was mortal. Fun fact about Benjamin Lee, he became an inventor and took out a patent for hop yeast, an imperishable yeast agent that's used to make bread and beer that made it stay fresher longer as an antibacterial agent. So when you drink fresh beer, you can thank Harper's Ferry veteran.
I thought you were going to tell me that he was behind Sara Lee bread.
He might have been, but maybe that's what he did after he made the bread.
When you said bread, I was like, Sara Lee?
But anyway, Colonel Miles will be taken back to his headquarters at the Master Armorer's house where he is going to die. Miles' last words were to Captain Eugene McGrath, and they were, quote, "Captain, I have done my duty to my country and I am ready to die. God bless you." And then he died. So what happens now? With Miles gone, General Julius White will assume control of the Harper's Ferry garrison. Now remember, this is the guy who did not want to surrender.
Yep.
But at this point now, he knew his only task was to formally surrender to Stonewall Jackson. You can only imagine how this must have been for him.
Oh, yeah.
White will get dressed up in his best dress uniform, and he'll ride his black horse to the rebel lines. He will officially surrender the Harper's Ferry garrison at 7 p.m. on Monday, September 15th, 1862. The surrender of the Harper's Ferry garrison was the largest military surrender in United States history at that time, and held that distinction until May 6th of 1942, when an astonishing 76,000 U.S. troops were surrendered to the Japanese after the fall of Bataan in the Philippines. So at Harper's Ferry, Jackson bagged a whole bunch.
Yep. Yeah, he did. And it's one of those battles that, it's if you study it, you realize how important of a piece to the Maryland campaign puzzle it is. And it's a reminder that you can't just study like the Battle of Antietam in the Maryland campaign, just like you can't just study the Battle of Gettysburg in the Gettysburg campaign. Yeah. You're missing a whole bunch of stuff that leads into it, and will help, I think, understand Antietam better, just like it helps understand Gettysburg better. And it also helps, you also see too how Harper's Ferry is factoring into the Battle of South Mountain because of where McClellan has to send his troops when he finds this order. And keep in mind too that the Battle of South Mountain, fought on September 14th, 1862, is a Union victory.
Oh, no question. I mean, Harper's Ferry, Jackson he's going to take the surrender of 12,419 prisoners, 73 cannon, 13,000 small arms, 200 wagons, and God knows how many DQ gift cards. Ew. But it's funny, the men blame the surrender on the sheer incompetency of Colonel Dixon Miles. And until their dying day, they had to live with the knowledge that they were unfairly ridiculed by many in their army who referred to them as the Harper's Ferry cowards. Now, when Lee learned of the surrender of Harper's Ferry, it meant that his Maryland campaign was not over. Lee was considering going back to Virginia because if McLaws got cut off, he had to go. There was no way he could stick around. But now, having seized the two garrisons before McClellan could cut his army in half, Lee knew this plan was to push his troops further into Maryland and Pennsylvania, and his plan was still alive. In Washington, the fall of Harper's Ferry was predictably met with shock and disgust. You know who many people blamed? was Henry Halleck.
Yeah.
Because Halleck was the one who insisted on holding Harper's Ferry, despite what many generals, including McClellan and later Hooker, they felt it was indefensible. And that's why Hooker wanted the troops, because it was pointless to have them there.
Well, it's like, it's one of those things like, okay, do we really need to have this? Yes, it's going to suck if the Confederates are occupying it, but what is that going to do for us if we have to keep troops there and we're constantly going to be threatened, right?
Well, that was all. Even on the Confederate side, Harper's Ferry was seen as impossible to defend. After the battle, A.P. Hill wrote, quote, "I would rather take the place 20 times than undertake to hold it once." It's an ebola. It's completely undefensible. Lee's army would rejoin in full in Sharpsburg, Maryland, with the exception of Hill's division, who was ordered to stay back at Harper's Ferry, process all 12,419 prisoners, and arrange the capture of those supplies to be sent to Lee. Now, one of the sadder stories of the Harper's Ferry falling to the Confederates was the plight of those citizens, the civilians. Of the 100 civilians in town, many were freed blacks or contrabands. When Hill discovered them, he put them in wagons and sent them to Richmond to be sold into bondage or returned to their masters. It was the only record I could find of this happening during the entire Maryland campaign. But it's important to remember that the sad final act of this drama, that was the Battle of Harper's Ferry.
Yeah.
And so, like to your point, like you said a while ago, it's important because if there's no Harper's Ferry, there is no Antietam.
Yeah.
So again, it's an important battle. We've said this many, many times that the small battles lead to big battles. And when you look at the Maryland campaign, you're talking about the South Mountain, Harper's Ferry, Antietam, Shepherdstown, the skirmish at Williamsport, all of it being driven back. But Harper's Ferry was the key. It was the most important domino that had to fall for Lee, because he knew he could not do what he wanted to do, because he knew his supply lines and his communication was going to be cut immediately by these two garrisons. So this is one of Jackson's better moments, but I think you have to look at it with a grain of salt again, because once again, unfortunately, like the great Nathaniel Banks, Jackson went up against somebody who was much lower than him as far as competency goes. And when you're looking at some of the true incompetence in the American Civil War, we've talked about a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
Dixon Miles has got to be at the top of the list.
Oh, I think he's up there with Soy Smith.
I mean, so when you're looking at someone like Jackson, this is taking candy from a baby. I mean, not only was he going up against a much smaller army, a lot of green troops like the 126th New York, it was an indefensible place. He had no retreat route at all. He was stuck in those confluence, by the way, the great word you used earlier.
Yeah.
You must have looked that one up.
I did.
Of the rivers and the mountains. He really had no way to go. So again, it was a doomed plot from the beginning. So Lee's plan to capture Harper's Ferry did work. It did lead to the Battle of Antietam. And eventually we know what happens there, which is 163 years ago to this day.
Yep.
Exactly. So I think we can pretty much finish up this one right now. I think it's important that the story's told, and it's a great one because there's a lot of interesting characters in this one too, and a lot of the people, guys like Lawrence Branch, guys like that, would go on to fight and die in Antietam just a couple of days later. So this would be their last successful battle, a lot of different ways. So.
Yep, it's definitely an interesting one to study, and would again, as Darren said, you got to study the campaigns too, and these smaller battles that are leading to bigger battles. One thing I do want to add is one interesting story from Harper's Ferry is that when the Confederate soldiers get there, they're going to be feasting on Union food and supplies, which I'm sure they enjoyed because their rations were getting low. But some of them also take some federal uniforms, which is going to cause some confusion at the Battle of Antietam coming up as well.
Yeah, you're going to see the first South Carolina Rifles and a Maxie Gregg. They're going to have blue uniforms, and a rumor has it even some U.S. flags. So they're going to run into those poor New Englanders from the 4th Rhode Island, the 16th Connecticut at the Sheriff's cornfield at Antietam a couple of days later. But we have some stuff coming up that we have to talk about, Mary.
We do, yes. So our next episode is going to be about two of Colonel John Mosby's spies, Antonia Ford and
Laura Radcliffe.
You
always forget about Laura Radcliffe.
I know. Anyway, they were going to be doing an episode about that. We are also going to be joined by our good friend Jay Price for our annual Halloween Spooktacular.
That's coming
to drop around the end of October. This will be our 6th Halloween Spooktacular.
It is. And when this episode drops, couple more things are going to happen tomorrow night on Thursday. Well, no one's going to hear it by then. We are doing a YouTube Live with our friends, the Battle of Antietam podcast. John Banks and the great Tom McMillan to talk about the Battle of Antietam.
Yes, we were guests on their podcast last week,
We
so
were.
be sure to check them out.
Yep.
The Battle of Antietam podcast with Tom McMillan and John Banks.
Yeah, definitely. And
I
think I just said that. Anyway, but on Friday, we are going to, speaking of our friends, we're going to be over at the National Civil War Museum. We are volunteering again for the third consecutive year. We'll be doing a little bit of trivia, giving away some prizes. So if you are coming to the museum, definitely come and say hello. Definitely support the museum. It's a great service they do. Our friend Wayne Motz is there now, joining the great staff they have, Mary Beth and the gang over there right now that are going to be doing good work. It's their Cocktails and Cannonballs, their third one, and we're going to be there. So come say hi, and don't forget, you can get some of our cigars from Getty's Gear.
Exactly.
They'll be there as well.
And we do have a cigar called Lost Order 191, so thank you to Carrie, Jan, and Kat for that.
It is. It's all good. It's all good. So we got a lot of stuff, a lot of busy stuff going on at the foot at the Circle K, Mary. So any final words from you?
Just thank you to all our listeners for your support for these 155 episodes. Thank you to you, Darren, for being the amazing co-host you are. And also, do have to remember the Western Theater. Tomorrow is the anniversary, the 162nd anniversary of the Battle of Chickamauga.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of that, I almost forgot. We were on our friend Darren with 2 R's, his podcast, the U.S. and UK Civil War group, and they will be dropping an episode we did with them on the aforementioned Chickamauga next couple of days as well. So watch this spot. You'll be able to see that as well. We've been bouncing around quite a bit. So a lot of stuff going on here at the Old Breakfast Club. And we appreciate your support and appreciate everybody jumping on. Hopefully we'll see you all soon, as we like to say, on the other side.
See y'all later.
Peace out.
Bye.